I'm Tori, and today I'm going to be talking about Mrs. Queen Takes the Train by William Kuhn. I listened to the audiobook narrated by Simon Preble, and it was great. He had this very royal British voice that was just fabulous for this story. So the premise of this book is that one day the Queen of England decides to walk out of the palace and get on the public train to go on an adventure. And so it's basically the story of why the Queen decided to do this, what made her feel like she needed to go on an adventure by herself, and then what all the people in her household do to try to protect her, because they don't call MI5 or, any of the main authorities to try to get her back. They want to protect her from all the bad publicity this could cause. And so it's just a lot of the people who are really closest to the Queen kind of trying to go out and find her and bring her back without alerting the media and without causing this big circus to try to get her back. So this book is very fun and very charming, and it's mostly about people talking to each other and getting to know each other and interacting. It's about the Queen and how she relates to all of her staff that are in her house working with her, and how she relates to these people she meets, because she manages to go out kind of in disguise and people don't really realize they're talking to the Queen. So it's about her learning to talk to people and be treated like just a normal person. And then all of her staff members trying to get her back are from very different kind of classes, because the palace still has a very kind of rigid class structure. And so it's all these different people who wouldn't normally interact, having to try to get along and figure out how to work together and learn about each other. And the Queen in this is very fun. The book was written in, I believe, 2012, and so it's pretty much now, it's Queen Elizabeth II. But she's a very fun version of Queen Elizabeth II. She does yoga, and all of the book isn't divided into chapters, it's just little sections that break off into different people's point of view. But it's divided into sections, and each section is a different yoga pose. And she just has this great chipper personality, and she's a very fun queen, so it's great to kind of see the Queen. So I really liked this book. It had a great ensemble cast. All the characters were very distinct and very memorable, and it was really fun to spend some time getting to know them. So go read this book. If you can, listen to the audiobook, because that was great with the proper British tones and everything. That really added a lot to it. And then come back and hear my opinions about it. So I really loved the Queen in this. I loved all of her little yoga poses and stuff, and the way she talked to everyone and got to know all the different people she met on the train and stuff. I loved her wearing the skull hoodie with the little skull thing on the back. That was so great to have the Queen of England walking around in a hoodie with a skull on the back. And how she made friends with the blind couple on the train, and then with the 20-something, the younger person with all the piercings and stuff. I thought that was great. I liked her talking to the social worker, and when she got picked up by the social worker and mistaken for a homeless person, that was just so great. I love that part so much. And the way she was perfectly fine hanging out with all the other homeless people, getting her cup of tea, chatting with all the church volunteers. That was just very fun. I also loved how much she loved her horse, the horse Elizabeth, and giving her cheese and making sure she went out and bought this ridiculously expensive kind of cheddar to give to the horse, because, she loves the horse. And I don't actually know that much about the real Queen Elizabeth II. I've seen the first season of The Crown on Netflix, and so what I know is basically from that. That's all I really know about her. But in that, she was also very into horses and racing and stuff like that, so it would make sense to me. I get the feeling that the Queen does like horses, so it was very fun to see her getting her cheddar for Elizabeth. Another thing that I thought was really funny about the Queen was that, basically in this book, she had no husband, and you really got the feeling that the author would have liked to just kill him off, or something, and not have him be there, but since it's based on real people, he has to be there. So at the beginning, they make an offhand mention of the fact that he's away traveling, and then when she talks about her experience with marriage, as opposed to, Diana's experience with marriage, you just stick it out. And she knew her husband had been cheating on her, and they weren't really all that close, and he traveled, and she didn't really miss him. So it was interesting, because even though she was technically married, and they mentioned it a bit, she was basically single, and he had no role in her life. So I thought that was very interesting. It was fun how it opened with her trying to learn to use the computer, and then, you know, she was having a hard time figuring it out and she didn't want to have to call for help. And then by the end of the book, she had friends, and they taught her how to kind of use the computer, and then she knew that she could call Rebecca if she needed more help, and it was very fun that she had kind of learned something. She learned on this little adventure that she wasn't alone, and she did have people she could talk to, and I thought that was really sweet. I liked that the book dealt with depression, and it's a common that affects all different people, whether you're, you know, a poor commoner or the Queen of England. Sometimes everyone has to deal with this, and you have to figure out, you know, if you're clinically depressed, if maybe antidepressants would be a good idea, you know, and she spends a lot of time thinking about why she's upset, and then in the end she finally does decide that she should talk to a doctor about antidepressants. And I like that she says, life's too short to feel sad, and so I thought that was very fun that she kind of learned that little thing, and that she was okay talking about it, you know, and it wasn't quite so stigmatized. It was also interesting to me how they dealt with all the Diana stuff, and they said a lot of her depression was caused by her thinking about the Diana thing. Even though it had happened years and years ago, it was still really bothering her how that all played out, you know, and I know that the public really turned against her, and so it was interesting to think about how that would have affected her, to have people hate her so much for that. So I thought it was very fun. I loved meeting our spunky, fun queen. So for the rest of the book, you know, you got the little introduction, and everyone kind of split off into pairs to go about their merry way. So I liked Shirley and Anne. You know, it was interesting to see, before they both had their friendships, you know, I liked Shirley and William's friendship, and I really liked in that, that, you know, they were good friends, and it talked a little bit about homophobia and how Shirley viewed William as going off to do these dangerous things, and she had to kind of try to learn that he's not some crazy clubbing off to do these scary, death-defying things. It's just part of who he is and just how his romantic life works, and it doesn't make him this, it's not really that scary of a thing, and she kind of learned that after a while. I liked their friendship. I thought it was very sweet with all the little movie watching trips and stuff. And then I really liked Anne and how she worked on the kind of military helpline thing to help people out. It was great to see her talking to Luke and kind of getting him to open up and seeing that he was still carrying around a lot of baggage and stuff from his time in the military. It was really interesting to see Shirley and Anne talk to each other. You know, Shirley had that feeling that because her grandmother had a heart attack and whoever that awful noble woman was didn't care at all, you know, it's like, oh, well, you shouldn't be sitting here. You go to the servants' quarters to sit down. I don't care if you're having a heart attack. You know, because of that, she felt very underappreciated by everyone, and like other people thought she didn't matter as much. And so it was nice to see her and Anne kind of learning to take care of each other, because Anne also felt like there was no one around to take care of her. And they both kind of felt like they'd given their lives to this whole institution of the way royalty works in England, and then no one cared about them. They didn't feel like it. And so it was fun to see that they could care about each other, and that there were people who wanted the best for them and would look after them and make sure that they didn't end up completely alone. And so then Luke and William were my favorite pairing, because they were such a cute couple. I liked them so much. I thought it was fun to see, you know, William had just kind of given up because he was so devoted to his job. He didn't have a lot of opportunities for romance. He always kind of put work first. And he just kind of given up on having a really, you know, meaningful romance in his life. And then Luke had his horrible PTSD experience from serving in the military. And it was really interesting to talk about what it would be like to lose someone and have someone die who wasn't your soulmate, who you weren't epically in love with, but who you really liked and respected and who was a good friend, and you hadn't quite gotten there yet. It really dealt with that limbo of, you know, Andrew meant a lot to him, but they hadn't really had that much of a full-blown relationship. They were just still getting to know each other, and to just have that kind of cut off leaves you with all these sort of unresolved feelings, and it was really interesting to kind of get to experience that through Luke's eyes. I thought it was interesting that at first, you know, Luke was really kind of pursuing William and saying, oh, we should go off on this trip together, it'll be fun, we'll go track the queen down together. And then Luke kind of got cold feet and backed out, and then William was the one who was saying, oh yes, I'm definitely going with you, we're definitely doing this together. I thought it was so sweet the way they curled up and fell asleep, and it was just adorable. And then that led to my favorite part of the entire book, was Luke getting up and wandering out of bed. He's all tired, he's in his boxer shorts, and he wanders in and sees the Queen, and it just goes, and he has this long conversation, and just goes on and on and on, with Luke standing there in his boxer shorts, talking to the Queen of England, as one does. Alright, so then my least favorite set of characters we followed was Rebecca and Rajiv, because something about their dynamic just made me uncomfortable. You know, Rajiv was pursuing Rebecca, and she wasn't wanting to be pursued, and sometimes the way that can play in a book or movie is that it feels kind of like she does want to be pursued, but she's afraid, and he sees that and is willing to get her to open up, and I think that's kind of what they were going for. But it never felt like she wanted the interaction. You know, she talked about being afraid of boys her whole life and not really knowing what to do with them. They didn't like her, they thought she smelled bad, and she just didn't know what to do with them. And then later on, you know, she went out with the activist guy with the badger, and she met Dickon, and then she went out with Rajiv, and it felt to me like every time the book talked about her meeting a guy and going out with him, there was never a feeling of her wanting to go out or feeling lonely and wishing she had a guy in her life. It was more the feeling of, I know I'm supposed to have a guy in my life, and oh look, there's a guy interested in me now. I guess I better give it a try, because that's what you're supposed to do. And it just felt like she didn't really want that. She didn't talk about feeling lonely or incomplete. She didn't talk about feeling tongue-tied or wishing she had a guy around. She never expressed any desire to have someone there. And then Rajiv had just always tried to flirt with girls and never really been able to pull it off, and I got the feeling that there wasn't even anything he particularly liked about Rebecca. It was just that she was the first girl who hadn't been able to chase him away, and that was just because she didn't have the social capabilities to chase him away. And he kind of liked her, but mostly it was just that he'd tried to flirt with girls before, and this was the first time he managed to get one who wouldn't try to get rid of him. And I also didn't like about Rajiv, you know, he'd start out with the whole thing of he was a paparazzo taking pictures of the Queen and stuff. And to me that could have played out really well one of two ways. Either he could have gone on his journey and met the Queen and decided, okay, you know what, I need to give her her privacy. She deserves some respect. I'm going to back off, and I regret what I did, or at least, at the very least, I'm not going to do it again, and I'm going to think about that and discuss it and make the conscious decision to stop doing that. Or he could have met the Queen and kind of explained to her how much it meant to the people to see her, which he explained to other people, but not really to the Queen. And he could have kind of said, you know, I'm showing people how much they can love you, and she could say, oh yeah, I appreciate that. All right, I'll let you take some pictures of me, or I'll be more tolerant of the paparazzi. And they were kind of like, that was sort of like a divided thing. Like, Rajiv told someone else that he thought the pictures of the Queen brought joy to the people. And then the Queen, when Rajiv was nowhere around, said that she would stop at the top of the steps and let people take her picture. But it felt, that whole little storyline felt underdeveloped to me, and I wish they would have kind of finished it off a little more. And so it was unclear to me if Rebecca even wanted to date at all. I wish she would have talked about that more, you know. Like, for all we knew from the way the story was presented, she could have been completely asexual. She could have been gay. She could have been waiting to meet the man of her dreams. We don't know, because she never expressed any kind of desire or to be with any of the men that she met. She loved the animals, and she liked the one activist guy because he had the badger, and she was stuck with Rajiv and didn't hate him, and, you know, she developed really companionable feelings for him, but I never got the feeling that she was particularly drawn to him. And then at the end, when she was in the room with the Queen and Shirley and Anne, and they were all in the hospital room together, kind of having their girls' time, then Rebecca talked about how, well, she didn't know what was going on with Rajiv because she hadn't told two other boys no. But that whole time she didn't talk about wanting to say yes to any other boy of those boys. She talked about, you know, the activist who she definitely didn't like, so I don't know why she wouldn't tell him no. You know, that's the thing. Like, if she didn't tell the activist she hated no, then her not saying no to the other two seemed iffy to me. And then we only saw Dickon in that one little scene when he was helping Rebecca deal with the activist when she was traumatized from, like, seeing them try to hurt the horses. And he was nice to her that one time, but we never found out what happened. If Dickon tried to pursue her, if they became friends, if she felt anything romantic toward him. We never got any more of that. We just heard her later count him with the other romantic people. And I felt kind of like that was only stuck in there so that she could have the link to Anne, because Dickon was Anne's son. And I would have liked to know more about that. And so then when she was with Rajiv, you know, she never seemed like she felt really comfortable. And she was saying, like, at the end it seemed like she said, okay, I can tolerate this. It's all right. But she never seemed enthusiastic about it. And I guess the person I was rooting for her to be with the most was Dickon. And that's just because we didn't see very much of him. So I could imagine that he wasn't pushing her. You know, I would have liked Rajiv a lot better if he had said, okay, I see that you're uncomfortable. I'm going to let it be known that I have romantic feelings for you. And I'm going to back off and let's just be friends. And if you decide you want to pursue me, then you can. Or, you know, something that was just a little less pushy, because she expressed over and over again that she didn't want his attentions, and he just kept pushing. And the story presented it as, you know, he was going to help her come out of her shell and she'd be happy in the end. But he had no way of knowing that, and that could have been very unwanted, just like the activist, you know, and she could have felt very trapped and kind of stalked and uncomfortable, and he had no way of knowing how she felt. So their whole dynamic just made me uncomfortable. So I did really like seeing toward the end of the book when everyone all met up in that house after the Queen had gone to go see her yacht, and they all wound up in the same town and were all staying together. It was fun to see them all curled up in their different rooms, you know, and I loved how Anne and Shirley had decided to take care of each other. You know, they were going to be the two, like, maiden aunts who were going to stay together, and you know, the other two pairings were romantic, but I didn't get a romantic vibe from Anne and Shirley. I thought they were just two friends who were going to be, you know, like, they didn't have any other family, so they decided to be each other's surrogate family. And then, you know, I loved seeing Luke and William curled up like that, and then seeing Luke come in the boxer shorts. That was just amazing. And it was unclear, there was some offhand reference to Rebecca and Rajiv being in the same room, I thought. I wasn't sure because I listened to the audiobook and it's harder to go back and check. But then it never talked about that. It never addressed what happened, or if she was comfortable with that at all, or anything like that. So I would have liked to know more about that. Then after they all got back, you know, kind of back to reality from their little adventure, I liked it that they all got to go to the play together. And that was kind of fun. And that kind of dealt with the issue. Like, part of the reason the Queen had been so depressed was because she felt kind of ornamental and didn't really know what she was good for. I know that people in England tend to feel very strongly about the Queen. Either they think that she's a very important part of their culture, or that she doesn't really do much. No, I think a lot of people think she is a very important part of the culture. And I live in the US. We don't really have any institute that I can think of like that. That's just, it doesn't really do much functionally for the government, but we still think of it as like a strong part of our heritage. I guess maybe keeping pennies and not giving those up would be a thing like that. And so I liked it at the end when there was the bomb threat and everyone was scared. She was able to say, okay, what I can do is kind of be strong and help people feel less afraid and just kind of comfort them when times are hard. And she really managed to, that was just a very sweet moment. Then I loved the way the book ended, how we went to all of our little pairs of people and they were all reading the same passage from the play. And they managed to pick it apart so that William and Luke had their romantic ending. And then I guess Rebecca and Rajiv decided to date. You know, they read the same thing, it tied it all in. And then Anne and Shirley were reading it, you know, and they were going to take care of each other and stuff. And then the Queen was reading it. And at first, you know, it's kind of sad because all these other people were in pairs and they had someone to read it with, and the Queen was alone. And that was how she felt at the beginning of the book. But then she remembered that she had these friends, and she had her little Twitter account that the only people who followed her were the people that she met on her train excursion, and so she could share her thoughts with all those people because, you know, now she had friends, and I just thought that was so sweet. So this book was really great. I loved how spunky the queen was, and I loved just watching the different people kind of talk and get to know each other. Some of the relationships were a little problematic, but overall I just had a lot of fun and I had such a good time reading it.